Okay, and up next, I want to continue with CRUD functionality. So create, read, update, and delete. But here's the thing. The way app is set up, it's not like we can do it somewhere here in the add job. First, we'll have to set up all jobs. And as you can see, it's quite complex. So eventually there's going to be a form and also a pagination logic down at the bottom. But when it comes to edit and delete, notice it's attached to a single job. So let's say in here, I can click on delete. So now we delete the job. And if we go with edit, we navigate back to the add job. However, now, of course, we change the values. And if, let's say, I'm going to go with pending and click submit, now we modify the job. But since I don't want to work on the search form right now, as well as the pagination, we'll just set up the structure with the list of jobs. Then we'll work on delete and edit. Basically, we'll complete the CRUD functionality. After that, we'll work on the stats, and then we'll come back to all the jobs. So we'll set up the search form as well as the pagination. So we'll hop a little bit. We'll set up the structure for all jobs. We'll render all jobs, but we won't add the search logic as well as the pagination. We'll set up the CRUD, then we'll work on stats, and then we'll complete all jobs page. And we're going to start by setting up another feature. Like I mentioned, when we were setting up the job feature, it was my preference to basically split them up. So we'll have one feature where we'll deal with create, edit, and delete the specific job. And then there's going to be another feature where we'll fetch all the jobs. We'll have the pagination as well as the sort functionality. And also, this is where we'll get the stats. And first, we'll start by creating that feature. So in the features, let's go with all jobs and all jobs slice. And this is going to be initial state. Now, I'm going to cover these things once we get there. So don't freak out. Of course, I'll cover this in way greater detail once we start setting up this logic. For now, we only actually need is loading and jobs. Again, please don't worry about the rest of them. Now, the reason why I go here with initial filters state, set up some values, and then use the spread operator is simply because at some point we'll want to set back everything to the default. And again, once we set up that functionality, it's going to make more sense. Now, as far as the imports, again, we have create slice, create async thunk, toast, of course, custom fetch, which eventually we'll use into thunk, but I want to do that refactoring later. And also, it looks like that by mistake, I added these imports. Actually, they're not needed. And don't worry, in your README, you won't see them. So this is the case again where I want to take everything as far as imports, initial filter state, and initial state. And then we'll just set up this create slice. Simply because, again, the values need to match exactly. I don't want to make any typos. And I also don't think that it's beneficial for you to watch how I type. So first, let's create the all jobs and all jobs slice in the features. So let's start over here. We want to go with new folder. Let's go with all jobs. Then let's go with all jobs slice. And after that, let's copy and paste. So back in the README, we want to grab the imports. We want to get initial filter state. And also we want to get the initial state. And then rest of it, of course, we'll set it up. So let's copy and paste. And let's go right now with the all job slice. Const all jobs slice is equal to create slice. It is a object. Create slice. It is an object, and we want to pass in the name first. And then also we want to set up the initial state. So name is equal to all jobs. And then initial state is equal to initial state. We do want to export this. So export. This is going to be the default export. All jobs slice. And then a reducer. And then let's navigate to the store. We want to copy and paste. This is going to be all jobs is equal to, and it's not a user slice. Call this all jobs slice. And this is coming from, of course, the file. So all jobs, and then more specifically, all jobs slice. So let's complete here the reducer, and we should be good to go. So now we just want to navigate to the browser, and let's see in the DevTools whether we have the proper setup, whether we have basically all the slices. So let me go to the Redux DevTools, and yep, I have all jobs and then the rest of the values. So with this in place, now I can add more logic, and I think I'm going to start by setting up the structure for the all jobs page. And up next, let's set up the structure for all jobs page. So first, in the components, I want to create a search container where eventually we'll have all our search logic as well as the inputs and all that. Also, I want to set up jobs container, and this is where we'll display list of jobs as well as the pagination. And also I want to set up a job.js. So this is where we'll display all of the properties, whether that is the position, the status, and all that. And of course, yes, the edit and delete buttons. Now, for now, we'll just set up some dummy return. In my case, I'm going to go with some headings just so we can see what we have. And then we want to set up, of course, the import and export, and import jobs container and search container in the components. Keep in mind that job is only going to be used within the components folder, so we don't need to set up import and export for that. But yes, for the jobs container and search container, we do need to set them up in the index.js in the components, just so we can access them in the rest of the project. So let me start here by creating those 3 components. So we're looking for search container.js. Let me set up the component, and I'll just switch this one to a heading 1. Then we want to create a jobs container, I believe. Container, same deal. We want to set this one up. And as a side note, I messed it up here. This is not quotation mark. Let me create that component. And in here, let's just change it around again to a heading 2. And then lastly, we want to set up that job.js. Job.js, same deal. Some kind of return. In my case, it's just going to be a job. And then in the index, let's grab both of those components. So jobs container and search container. Search container, I'll select both of them here. Paste it inside. And then in the all jobs page, not slice, sorry. I want to navigate to the pages. We specifically are looking for the all jobs. And then we want to import. So we want to import jobs container. And also we want to set up a search container. Search container over here. Then let's go here with a fragment. So basically we're not going to enclose in any of the elements. We'll simply go with a fragment. And then let's start by rendering the search container. By the way, I probably could have just copied this one. So let me take this one out and then let me set it up over here. So we'll go here with jobs container. Let's close this one. Let's save it. Let's take a look. For time being, we only have the heading 2s, but at least this is a good start. If we have a structure, then of course we can start implementing more logic. Okay, and once we have the general structure in place for the all jobs page, now let's work on the jobs container. So in here, I want to get the use effect, since eventually we'll fetch the jobs from the API, and we want to invoke it over here. We want to get the job, since we will iterate over a list of jobs and we will display them. Now, granted, at the moment we have no jobs, we have empty array, but don't worry, that is coming up. We also want to get the wrapper, so we want to get all the styles, as well as use selector and use dispatch, since we'll grab some things like jobs and is loading from our all job slice, and also we'll dispatch some actions. Like I said, from here we will fetch the jobs. Now, why I set up in such a way the application where we're fetching the jobs from the jobs container? simply because eventually there's going to be a search logic. And at least in my opinion, it makes a bit more sense if we're not hiding the search form while we're fetching. So instead of showing the spinner while the request takes place, I'm only showing the spinner and hiding the current jobs. Basically, when we're loading, then we display loading spinner. And then once we get the new jobs, we display list of jobs. But the search form stays in place. Now, do you have to have the same setup? No, you don't. Again, this is really up to a preference. Now, first, I want to check if we're loading. Then for time being, we'll just display the heading 2 with loading ... But at the end of this video, I'll set up actual component. And also we want to check if we have no jobs to display, which by default is going to be our case, since again, we have empty array. Now, when it comes to application, it's going to be in two cases. The moment user shows up, basically he or she hasn't created any jobs, or the user is trying to search for something that basically doesn't exist in a database. So if the user is saying, hey, get me all the jobs where the letters are DD and then status is interview and you can read the rest, well, in that case, API is saying, hey, look, you have no such jobs. So if the API cannot fulfill the search request, then of course the value will be no jobs to display. And then if we're successful, we'll go with wrapper, then heading 5. Now, there's going to be more stuff in here. You'll see that eventually, so we'll have this 5 jobs found. Effectively, we'll display how many jobs total we have. But for now, let's just go with jobs info. And then we want to go with div with a class of jobs, iterate over the jobs. For every item, we'll go with job component. We have a key. Now we do want to pass in the underscore ID. And I'll explain that in greater detail in the next video once we're done with fetch request. Long story short, when it comes to MongoDB, the database that I'm using on the API, it sets up these values automatically, the ID ones, and the property names are underscore ID. And then rest of the properties that we have in the job, for example, when it was created, the company, the status and all that, we'll just pass in with ... job. But again, we'll talk about these ones in greater detail next video once we actually get the jobs data back, and then you'll be able to see exactly what properties I'm talking about. For now, I just want to do the setup. So let's start here by grabbing all of these imports. And back in the jobs container, we want to copy and paste. And now let's set up the logic where I want to go with jobs and is loading from the state, more specifically from the slice, the AllJobs one, and then dispatch and use dispatch. So let's set this one up. So const jobs is loading, and then we'll go with use selector. Let's grab our entire store, and then let's say store all jobs. So then let's go with dispatch. So dispatch is equal to use dispatch, and let's set up that first condition. We'll say if we're loading, then we want to render basically the wrapper as well as the heading 2. So let's say if we're loading, then return wrapper, and then inside of the wrapper, let's set up that heading 2, and let's just say loading. Now, in order to see that, we need to navigate back to the job slice, and for time being, let's just hardcode, and let's set it equal to true. So once we navigate here, notice this is going to be our loading one. Now, after that, let me set it equal to false. And then in the jobs container, we also want to set up the condition if we have no jobs to display. And I already mentioned what are the 2 instances where we'll see that. So let's go with length is equal to 0. So if there are no jobs, then let's go with return, and I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit and copy and paste. And instead of heading 2, we'll say no jobs to display ... Let's save this one as well. So now, of course, we have this condition, and then let's set up a return, which at the moment we won't be able to see. But once we have the proper request, of course, everything is going to make sense. So for now, we want to go with heading 5, jobs, info. Then we want to go with div with the class of jobs. And then inside of this one, let's set up our expression where we go with jobs map. And then inside of the map function, you know what? I think I'm going to log the job just so you can see what I'm talking about. So eventually, of course, we'll remove it. For now, let's say job. And this is how I will reference each and every item. And also, we want to set up the return where we go with job key. And we're going to go with job underscore ID. Like I said, it's going to make a bit more sense in the next video. And then ... and job. Let's close this. We won't be able to see since we have no jobs in the array. So we'll still see this one. Don't worry, we'll see that soon enough. Now, the last thing that I want to do in this video is to set up a proper loading component. And not only I want to set up the component, but I also want to place it in the center. So let's start in the components where we create a loading JS. And you know what? I also want to right away set up in the state is loading to true, since we'll want to see that. Then in the component, in the loading one, we want to go here with the following classes. And this is coming from the global CSS. Basically, in the global CSS, you'll find a loading class and loading center. So this will just set up a spinner. And if I want to set up the spinner in the center, we need to add this class. So first, let's just go with the component. So RAFCE. Then let's add the loading class. And then we'll set up the logic to check for the center. Now, we don't need to add anything. And we don't need to add it to index.js because we won't export that. We'll use it only here in the component. So let's navigate back to the jobs container. And then let's look for job, or I'm sorry, what job? Loading. Let's grab this one. And then instead of this wrapper, let's just set up our loading component. Let's save it. And now you'll notice that spinner. Again, this is done with CSS. And there's a video on my channel where I cover how to create this one. Most likely in your README, you'll find actually a link. And the idea is that, yes, the loading spinner looks quite cool. But I also want to place it in the center. And that's why in the CSS, I added another class, loading center. So therefore, we'll come up with a prop. So if I want to place it in the center, then I'll add that extra class. If not, then of course, we'll just set it where it is. Now, just to showcase how it's going to look like eventually, let me go to loading. And then let me double check the class. It was loading center. So if we go here and if we say loading center, now, of course, the loading spinner is going to be in the center. So let's navigate back to the jobs container. Let's set up the prop. And now we just need to add the logic in the loading.js. We'll say if there is a center prop, then we want to return both of these classes. If not, then only one. So let me cut it out. Let me set up the expression here, and I'll say if there is center. So let's go with our ternary operator. Let's pass in both of the classes. If it's false, then it's just going to be a loading one. Save it, and now, of course, it is still sitting in the center. Now, if you don't want it in the center, just remove the loading. So if that's the look you're shooting for, just don't add the prop to begin with. And with this in place, we're ready to set up our function to fetch all the user's jobs from the API. And once the jobs container structure is in place, now let's set up get all jobs request. So it's going to be a get request. And the endpoint again is going to be the root URL plus the /jobs. And notice how the only difference between these two requests, so get all jobs and create jobs, is just a method. And yes, if the method is different, it's entirely different request. So with post request, we're adding resource onto the server. And with get, now we're getting all of the jobs. But technically the URL is exactly the same. Now, again, this is a restricted request. because we only want the user who created those jobs have access to it. And as far as return, we're going to get this object with jobs array, total jobs, which signal how many jobs we have, and that is going to be a number and number of pages. You see, right away on the server, there's going to be a pagination. So in this jobs array, we're only going to get 10 jobs at a time. And we'll also see how many pages we have in total. So 10 jobs per page. We'll get back by default the first page and total number of pages. And that's how we'll be able eventually to set up the pagination. And also, we want to see, well, how many jobs in total we have. So not in the first page, which is going to be in a jobs, or in any other page. Because again, max in here is going to be 10 jobs, but actually all the total jobs. And as far as the functionality, in the AllJobs slice, we want to go with create async thunk. Now in this case, since it's a GET request, we're not going to pass anything in, but we do want to have access to the thunk API. That's why we'll go here with this underscore and then comma. Again, this just means that we're not using this parameter. Technically, you can add the name if you want here, but again, it's really irrelevant since once we invoke it here in the jobs container, we're not going to pass anything in. So that's just a side note. And since eventually there's going to be also a search functionality, in this case, we'll set up a URL variable and we'll set it equal to /jobs, because eventually in here we'll add query parameters. So instead of just passing in the URL like we did before with /jobs, we're going to set up a separate variable since there's going to be some modifications in here. Now, as far as the actual request, we're going to go with custom fetch. So we have the root URL. We'll go with get. We'll pass in the URL variable. And of course, we want to set up the headers. And that's why we need this thunk API. Again, this is restricted access. So we need to show a valid token. As far as the response, we want to return that. And you know what? Also in this case, I think I'll log it just so we can clearly see all the properties and values. And also, if there is an error, we're just going to send back error response, data, and message. And when it comes to extra reducers, we want to go with state is loading is true while we're pending. Once it's fulfilled, we will set up loading equal to false and state jobs equal to payload jobs. Again, remember, we're going to get the data object in here. So in that data object, there's going to be a jobs property, which is going to be an array. And eventually we'll add the rest of them as well. So add the total jobs and number of pages. But for now, let's just work on jobs. I don't want to confuse you. And as far as rejected, we just want to set state is loading to false and toast error equal to a payload. So whatever the message. And I want to invoke this in the jobs container. So get all jobs. For now, we'll just go when the component loads. So use effect and then empty dependency array. But eventually, yes, there's going to be more values. So every time we type something in the search filter or add some different select option, then we'll invoke the get all jobs from the scratch, just so we can see the jobs that match our search criteria. And I think I'm going to just go to AllJobs slice right after the initial state. We want to go with export const equals to, by the way, I need to add the name get all jobs. And then let's go with create async thunk. As far as the name, I'm going to go with all jobs, then /, then get jobs. Then let's go with comma and let's set up as a sync. Like I said, we're not going to be looking for this parameter, so I'm just going to go with underscore comma and let's look for thunk API. That's something that we will need. And as far as the function logic, first let's set up that variable. So let URL and we'll go with template string /jobs. Like I keep saying, eventually we'll set up here the query string parameters. For now, let's go with try and catch. We want to look for response. So const response and then await. Then custom fetch that we imported, get method, and then we pass in the URL. We do want to right away set up the headers. And instead of the headers, let's go with authorization. And we'll set it equal to the bearer. So bearer, make sure that I'm typing everything correctly since I tend to make some silly typos. Get state. Now again, we want to get the entire state. Then we want to go with user, and then the token. I'm going to log this time the response and data. This is where we'll have everything. And I also want to return it. I want to say return, response, and data. And as far as the error message, technically, we can pass in the message that's coming back. But essentially, we'll have only two options. Either is going to be some kind of wrong URL, basically not found, so 404, or it's going to be a server error. Essentially, those are the two options. So if you want, you can definitely pass the message like I show in the README, but we can also just hardcode this message. So let's say over here, return, and then thunk API, and then reject with value. And let's just go with there was an error. And I'll try to showcase that by maybe messing up the URL. And now let's work on those extra reducers. So right after all jobs, we want to go with extra reducers. And let's set up the get all jobs, then dot, and that's not what I wanted. Get all jobs. And let's go with pending, I guess. So pending first. It's going to be equal to our function. We want to get the state. And we're not going to be looking for any payload here. I think we're good to go. Let's just set up state is loading. And we'll set it equal to true. Then let's copy and paste this sucker. 1, 2. And looks like I'm missing commas here. Then let's set up the fulfilled one. Like I said before, eventually we'll grab more things from the payload. Remember, we have that data object. But for now, let's just set up the payload as a parameter. And state is loading is going to be equal to false. And also, I want to go with state jobs equal to a payload jobs. And lastly, we have the rejected one. And then in here, loading is going to be equal to false. And we're just going to go with toast error. And let's set up the payload, which is something that I didn't destructure. So let me take this one out, add a comma, copy and paste. And then lastly, let's navigate to the jobs container. We want to invoke that when the component mounts. So we're going to go here with use effect. We'll pass in for now the empty dependency array. And also we'll dispatch, of course. So let's say dispatch. Let's pass in get all jobs. Yep, over here. So get all jobs and let's invoke it. So let's save this. And once I navigate to the browser, it complains that use effect is called conditionally. So you know what? Let's take this use effect and let's place it above the if statement. Now everything is going to be correct. So we have all the jobs. Let me refresh one more time. And then notice, this is what we're getting back. So this is in all jobs slice. I have jobs array. And at the moment I have 4 items. But like I keep saying, the max is going to be 10. So that's how many jobs we have per page. Notice how we also have total jobs of 4 and number of pages. So if you'll have, for example, 11 jobs, then total jobs is going to be 11. Number of pages is going to be already 2. And by default, you'll get the first page. So it's going to be 10 jobs. And then each job is going to be represented with this object. So every time we create this job, now this is what the server is setting up. So it's a company value, which obviously matches whatever we're passing in. Same goes for job location, job type. position, status, but we're also getting this created at, created by, and updated at. And this is coming from the server. So some of them will use, for example, created at, and some of them are just there because the server is sending back. So for example, updated at, we don't really care about. So our next task is going to be rendering those properties in the job component. So this is what we're shooting for. We want to display all of those values as well as the edit and delete buttons. All right, and now let's set up a proper return in the job component. First, I want to get some icons from the Phantasm library. I also want to get the link because this is something that I'll probably mention 50,000 times during this video and maybe even in the following videos. The edit button just navigates to the add job page and also sets the item which we're going to edit. So we're not going to invoke the request to edit the item once we click this button. No, once we click this button, we'll set which item we want to edit and we'll navigate back to the add job page. That's why we need to use this link from React Router down. I also want to get the wrapper since I want to add the CSS as well as use dispatch. Since when it comes to delete, yes, we'll dispatch it from the job component. Then we want to destructure all of the props that we passed in from the jobs container. So remember, this is an object that represents all the properties that we're getting. Notice all the way in the bottom, we also have this ID. So this is what automatically gets added by MongoDB. So if you want to give it an alias, for example, of ID, you can definitely do so. In my case, I'm just going to keep using this ID. Keep in mind that that is a unique ID for that specific job. And we'll need that ID when we want to edit and when we want to delete the job. Because server needs to know, hey, which job am I deleting? That's why over here we use that underscore ID as a key because this is unique. And we pass in all the properties that you see over here in this object by going ... and then job. And since this is not the first time we do that in the course, I believe that you're comfortable with this syntax. Now, inside of the job, I want to grab all of these properties as props. So underscore ID, position, company, and you can read the rest. I want to set up the dispatch since eventually we'll dispatch a delete action. And now let's work on return. Now, this is not going to be complete return because we'll set up a separate component for these suckers over here for the icon as well as the text. And I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail in the next video. So where we have the content center, let's just maybe set up a heading 4. And as a side note, of course, in your case, the heading 4 is going to be already in the README. Also, I'll say more content. So eventually, we'll set up a separate component for that. Just because we have repeating pattern here. So icon and then the text. Can you hard code this? Of course, you can set it up here in the job as well. But in my case, I'm going to go with separate component. And I also want to set up the status. And what's unique about the status is that there's going to be different styles for different status. So all of them at the moment are interview. Let me refresh. Yep. Now we see these ones. Okay, because I had a search here. My apologies. So if, let's say, the status is pending, then notice we'll have this CSS. If the value for the status is going to be interview, then we'll have this blue color. And for the decline, we'll have the red one. So therefore, when it comes to class name in here, we'll pass in status and the actual status value. And based on this one, we'll add different CSS. And I'll showcase in a wrapper where you can find that logic. And then in the footer here, this is where we want to set up those actions. First one is going to be the link back to the add job page. And we'll add some styles. For now, we'll just log edit job. So set the job we want to edit. And also we have button to delete the job. And again, for now, we'll just log delete the job. So let's get cracking. And I think I'm just going to navigate there and You know what? Yeah, I'll grab these ones. There's no point to type them. So back in the job JS, we want to copy and paste. So we get the icons, we get the link, we get the wrapper, we get the use dispatch. Now let's start by getting the props that we're interested. I want to get the ID, the position, the company, job location, job type, created at, and also a status. Then let's set up that dispatch. So we're going to go here with const dispatch is equal to use dispatch. Let's invoke that. Then we're going to go with our wrapper here. And inside of it, let's first start by setting up the header. Inside of the header, we want to go with div with a class of main icon. So we have some kind of styles. And essentially, I just want to set up that first letter. So that's going to be the first letter of the company. Now, if you want to set up the first letter, maybe of the position, of course, you can also set up that logic. The only difference is that you'll need to use a different property. So in my case, I'm going to go with company, then dot, and then in order to get the first character in JavaScript, we simply say char at, and then we pass in the 0. So once we save, this is what we should see. Let's see, let's refresh. Nope, at the moment I don't see anything. That's interesting. Okay, so we have the icon at job. Oh, of course, yeah. I'm staring at the add job and I'm surprised why I don't see anything. So this is what we'll see. This is going to be our job component, and we simply display the first letter of the company. Then we want to set up the info, where we'll have position and the company. So right after this div, let's go with info, and then heading 5. And we're going to go here with position. And let's copy and paste. And this is going to be actually a paragraph. And we'll go with company. Let's set up these values. So this is what we'll see. Then we have these icons and text coming up, as well as the status. So like I keep saying, these ones will set up in a separate component in the next video. So for now, we only care about this status. Not inside of this div, not inside of the header. So outside of the header, but still within the wrapper, we want to go with content. Inside of the content, let's set up a content center. And then in here, let's first just add a comment of, or you know what, let's set up that heading 4. So more content. And let's start by just creating a div. In here, we want to go with class name. And let's go with the expression, where first I'm going to get the status class. So this is going to add some general styles, and also want to grab the actual status value. And this will affect my CSS. And in here, in a div, I also want to showcase that value. So let's save this, and then we'll see these statuses. So at the moment, all of them are pending, and we cannot change that, but I can add a new one. So let me go here with, let's say, again, testing, and I just want to go with the client. And I also want to set up one for the interview, just so we can see what values we're getting back. And let's just change here to interview. Let's submit. Let's check out all the jobs. And now notice, not only we have pending, but we also have the client as well as the interview. And the way I set up the logic, if we navigate to the assets, to the wrappers, we're looking for job over here. Then let's keep on scrolling. Let's keep on scrolling. And then notice these styles over here. So these are going to be the classes that add those different colors. So if we take a look, let's say, at our elements in the job, I mean, I could have just selected actually here right away. My apologies. I should have went like this, inspect, and then we right away would get here. So notice for this guy, we have the classes of status and decline. So that's the value of the actual status. And I just set it up here as a class. So the same is going to be over here. If I go for interview, then I go with status and then interview. And you can clearly see which colors I added. So if you want to change that, you can definitely do so. And the last thing that I want to do in this video is to add those buttons. So right after the div of content center, so please don't place it inside of it, we're going to go here with footer. And then instead of the footer, let's set up another div. We'll go with actions here. And then let's first go with that link too. And we want to navigate back to add job page. Only in this case, we'll actually edit the job. We want to add some classes. So btn edit -btn. Then let's also add on click, not on can play. And as far as the values for that on click, for now, there's going to be an arrow function. And what do we want to log there? I don't know. I'm going to go with edit job. Now we probably want to add some text though. My apologies. Let's go with link, and then I'm going to go with edit. And also we want to set up a delete button. We want to do that right next to it. So we're going to go here with button. I think we can copy some of this stuff over here. So class name and on click, copy and paste. It's not going to be a edit button. It's going to be a delete one. And then log is going to be delete job. And also we want to set up the type button. So type button. And as far as the text, let's just go with delete. We navigate to the browser and check it out. This is what we're going to see. For now, we'll just log the actions we eventually will have. And as a side note, let me go back to jobs container. Let me remove this job log. I think we're clear. And also in the AllJobs slice, we don't need anymore this data one because we covered that one as well. So now my console is clean. And then if we click on edit, notice we navigate back to add job. And in the console, we should see the edit job. That's an awesome start. And then when it comes to delete, then of course we'll have for now just a log with delete job. And if you have the same result, now we can proceed and set up a job info component. Okay, and up next, let's set up the job info component. And basically, I created this component because there's a repeating pattern. There will be an icon I want to display as well as the text. Now, of course, the text matches whatever we set up in the job when we create one. But of course, the icon is really up to you. In my case, I just picked these ones. And like I said already before, of course, we can hard code that in the job component, but this is an awesome use case for the component. If we have that repeating pattern, why not? And we'll do that by creating a job info in the components. We want to grab the wrapper. So this is where we have all the styles. And then the component is going to be looking for two props, the icon and text. Inside of the wrapper, we'll set up two spans, one with class name of icon, one with class name of text, both values. And then inside of the job, we will first get date equal to created at, and that's something that we'll work on in the next video, and you'll see why. And then we want to pass in the job info component. So of course we import job info into the job. And then as far as the icon, I'm going to go with this one. When it comes to text value, this will be location, then date, and then job type. And all of this is going to be above the status, since we want to first display the job info and then the status of the job. So first, I guess, let me first close some stuff because I have tons of things open here. We want to go with job info.js. Let's get the wrapper. So in this case, we might as well can just save a little bit of time and then grab the wrapper. So job info. Then let's set up the component. And then as far as the return, let's go with the wrapper. Like I said, two spans in here. And we'll be looking for two props as well. So icon and text. First one will be the icon span, class name, and that one will be equal to icon. And we want to render the icon. And then the same deal with a text, only the value will be different here. So let's remove this and let's set up the text. Then back in the job.js, we want to import So go here with import job info. Then let's keep on moving. And above here, let's set up the date. For now, it's just going to be equal to created at because we still need to format it. So right above the return, let's set up const date. Date is equal to created at. So that's the property, again, that we're getting right from the server. We don't need to do anything. Server right away lets us know when the job was created. And now we want to go to the content center and let's set up 3 job info components. We're going to go job info. So for the first one, I'll set up this icon. And I believe that I imported in the correct order. So, or no. Actually, this is the first one. Then I have the second one here and then the briefcase. My apologies. I thought that I already imported them properly, but I guess not. So let me go with the location one. Let me close this component and then we want to go with text is equal to, and let's set up the job location. Let's close this and now we want to copy and paste. First, I'll change these values. So for now, I'll use this date, which is equal to create at, but like I keep saying, we'll format it in the next video. So for the second value, let's go with date. And then the last one will be a job and we'll set it equal to the type. Now, as far as the icons, let's change this one around. It's going to be the calendar one. And then the last one will be that briefcase. Let me save this. And now let's navigate to the browser. And like I said, we have a little bit of mess with created at, but rest of them are displayed correctly. So this is going to be the location, then the type, and of course, we already set up the status in the previous video. So with this in place, now we're ready to set up the correct format for our date. As far as the date format, we have tons of options. We can actually do it ourselves if we really want to. But just to showcase the awesome library of moment.js, that's the one that I used in this project. In the README, you'll find the URL to their docs as well as the command. So let's start over here. Let me navigate to this awesome site. As you can see, we have all the commands and we also can see the options we have. Now, I'm not going to cover all of them by any means. In fact, I'll just show you the one that I'm going to use. And of course, if you want to explore, you already know where the URL is located. So first, let me stop everything and we'll just install the library. Then let me just wait a second because I want to right away restart the server. And essentially, as far as the setup, we want to import the moment from moment.js. And then we can chain it or we can assign it to a new variable, something that you'll see in the docs. And basically, we want to pass in the created at chain format and then come up with a format. So this is my format that you'll see in the complete project. Like I keep saying, if you want to check out different options or maybe even implement one of them, then of course, please reference the documentation. So let's go to a job.js. We want to get the moment from moment, import moment from moment. Then let's keep on moving. And where we have created at, instead, we want to go with moment, pass in created at first, and then we'll chain whatever format we want. So let's pass in created at, then chain.format, and we're going to go with this one. So month, day, and the year. And once we save it, instead of this ugly date, we'll have a nicely formatted one instead. All right, and up next, I want to start working on delete job request. But before we can set up the logic in the job slice, we also need to add toggle functionality in AllJobs. And let me show you why. So if I navigate to complete application, we can see that we have job component. And this is where we invoke the delete job request, correct? Now, our delete job request is going to be in which state? Well, in my case, it's going to be in the job slice. So this is loading is not the same as in job slice loading. And that's the one that, of course, we use in the jobs container. So we have two options. Either we can set up delete job request in all jobs, or we need to somehow, some way access the loading of the all jobs. Why? Well, because we invoke it here, and I want to display that loading spinner while the request is taking place. So notice, first what we do, we display loading, and also we'll get new set of jobs, because I always want the jobs that we display to be up to date. So this is not just removing something from the actual UI. We are not only deleting the job from the database, we also fetch new jobs. And while all of that is taking place, I want to control that is loading. So notice once we click, I have two requests. So the first one is delete request, and then we get new set of jobs. So hopefully this makes sense. Again, the point here is that our request is going to be in a different slice, but the is loading that I want to control is this one, is in the all job slice. And in order to achieve that, we're going to set up two reducers, one to show loading and second one to hide loading. And then we'll get those into the job slice. And then once we invoke the delete request, which is something we're going to do in the next video, that's when we'll use it. We'll go dunk API and then show loading. So we'll display the spinner. We'll get the jobs, something that I'll cover in more detail in the next video. And also we want to hide the loading. So first, let's just navigate to all job slice and set up those two reducers. One simply displays and the second one hides the loading. So let me go back here above the extra reducers. I'm going to go with the reducers and let's set up two of those suckers. We'll say here show loading one, and then that one will be equal to our function. Set up here state. We want to add here comma, of course, and let's just go with state is loading is equal to true. Let's save this, and then we want to have an opposite as well. So we'll say here hide loading, and this will be equal to false. And you know what? Let's also right away set up all the exports. So I'm going to say here export const show loading, hide loading, and that one is equal to, of course, the all job slice and actions. And also let's right away go to a job slice and import all three of them. So not only I want show loading and hide loading, but we also want get all jobs, since once the delete request is done, if it's successful, then we want to fetch new set of jobs. And of course, in that new request, we won't have the job that we just deleted. So let's go here with show loading, then hide loading. And also we want to get all jobs. And once we have the setup in place, now we can start working on the delete job request.